Welcome back. My name is Scott McGurran, and we're doing a series on terrorism. This is something that I didn't want to have to do, but given the massacre in Christchurch, New Zealand, and given the response of Jacinda Ardern, I can't help but believe certain things have to be said and they're not being said. Okay, in the last video, we went through some of the history of this. We looked at Richard Nixon, his Secretary of State, and how essentially Islamic radicalization was invented as a way of destabilizing what was then a mostly Muslim Soviet Union. Okay, this was done at the behest of the banking cartel, which, as we know, and we talked about this, they have 100 times more influence in the world than do our elected officials. This is because they manage all the money, including our own. Whether the stock market goes up or down, this has more to do with them than it has to do with elected politicians. And so they are the primary power in our world. We need to understand this, but we need to understand other things as well. We talked about how after the Second World War, there was a unification of the security intelligence services in five white, and I'm going to say white, make no mistake, this was in part a racist, bigoted, and somewhat fascist idea, okay? We had five nations. We had the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand putting their security intelligence services together. This was called the Five Eyes. Now, for the first few decades, this was kept secret, but it all became public. Originally, the idea was this was to be a counterbalance against Russia, the Soviet Union. We would do whatever it was necessary to protect ourselves against them, but more importantly, to destroy them. And eventually that succeeded. Using, creating Islamic fundamentalism, creating this radicalization, we were able to destabilize and break up the former Soviet Union. In Afghanistan, we did the same thing but ramped it up to a different level. We saw that as a result of these activities that we participated in through our tax dollars, I'm not right or wrong, we participated, okay? We saw the creation of the Taliban governing Afghanistan. We saw the creation of Al-Qaeda. This was managed and guided by the CIA with financing and leadership from all Five Eyes nations, financing and guidance from Saudi Arabia and Israel, and people saw this as good because it was good for the banking system, therefore it was good for our investments, our retirement, paying off our mortgages, whatever it is we want to do, people saw it as good. So we all have blood on our hands. The vilification of Muslims continues. We see there are 7 nations being bombed to oblivion by the United States today with the help of all Five Eyes nations, again, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand. You know, we're all participating in these things. Now, with that being said, okay, so we have this massacre. Some crazy person from Australia buys into the idea that Muslims are bad, that they're trying to take over the world, that they're coming to get us. Well, where did he get that idea? Well, could it be that we've been promoting that idea since the 80s through our tax dollars? Could it be that he's been hearing it from us? That he's been hearing it because we've been telling him that? Because we thought it was in our financial interest to propagate this nonsense worldwide? Yes, we're bombing 7 different countries. We're going to destroy every nation in the world that stands in the way of our investments because we're greedy and selfish beings. Now, if Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, had acknowledged all of that first, before she said it was so terrible that this crazy person from Australia came to New Zealand and did what he did in the 2 mosques. if she'd acknowledged that, if she had said something like, as difficult as it's going to be to defy the United States, we're going to withdraw from the Five Eyes. We're not going to contribute through our military intelligence, through our tax dollars, toward the vilification of Muslims worldwide. We're not going to participate in the bombing of 7 countries at a time. We're not going to participate in a global program of assassination through drones that kills 2,000-3,000 people at least. I mean, there's 2,000 or 3,000 drone strikes. Well, there's collateral damage too. None of the people killed ever were charged with a crime. They never had their day in court. And we don't even hear their names. It's just taken for granted that if our governments are killing people all over the world, it must be for a good reason. It must be good for our investments. So as hateful as that might seem, we look the other way and allow this to continue on our behalf, especially those of us within the Five Eyes nations: United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, she was very compassionate, and I don't want to fault her for that, because it seems like she's being very compassionate on a genuine level. She has spoken about bringing in stricter gun control. Now, this is a policy that she's always had. She is the leader of the New Zealand Labour Party. She's always supported gun control. She's taking the opportunity to bring that forward. She was going to do that anyway. Whether that's political or opportunism or not, I don't know. But I know that New Zealand has always been the kind of nation where there were more guns than people. At the same time, they've always been the most peaceful nation on earth. I don't think, even if you took guns away from everybody, it would have any effect on terrorism. Most terrorists use explosives. They'll put explosives in their clothes. They'll go to a public place and blow themselves up. They use things like sabotage. Taking guns away from 100,000 good citizens in the hope of taking a gun away from one crackpot. Well, it was our governments telling the crackpot that it's the Muslims that are bad. It's the Muslims that are coming to get us. Of course, it's going to affect the crackpots first. They're going to be more likely to do something stupid, and this fellow did. And that is his fault, and he has to be punished for it. But for governments who promote this idea, for governments who deliberately fan the flames of hatred on our behalf, using our tax dollars, with our approval, because we're not doing anything to stop it. In fact, nobody even wants to talk about it, okay? Isn't that hypocrisy? If we think that by fanning the flames of hatred against Muslims, fanning the flames of hatred against Muslims is going to make our investments go up slightly, it's going to make the stock market go up slightly, bombing these 7 nations around the world that have never once ever attacked one of the Five Eyes nations. They have never attacked the United States, Great Britain. They've never attacked Canada, Australia, New Zealand, never had the desire to. But we're bombing them off the face of the earth. We're saying it's for humanitarian reasons. We're bombing them. We're saying we're going to bring them freedom and democracy. Well, you look at all the countries we've bombed. They don't have freedom, they don't have democracy, and they've never been worse off than they were before as a result of our intervention. This is strictly something that we do at the behest of the international banking cartel. New Zealand is an active participant, funding, promoting hatred against Muslims worldwide. So is Canada, so has all the Five Eyes nations. So when the Prime Minister is crying and telling people how sorry she is for them, yes, it's appropriate to have that level of compassion, but not at the same time as you're funding and causing the problem. Is it just me? Should there not be a public discussion of this issue? We do need to have a public discussion. And in the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what we as individuals, especially those of us living within the five nations, the Five Eyes, United States, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, we have to deal with this. If a person's living in the United States, what they can do on an individual level is going to be different to some extent than what an individual can do in New Zealand. But I'm going to go into that in great detail in the next video. What's happening in our world as our nations working on behalf of the international banking cartel, not even paying attention to what we would like them to do and not being very affected by whom we vote for. It seems the agenda remains the same. It doesn't make any difference who wins. The agenda stays the same because it's not being set by us, it's being set by the banks. I want to talk about this more and what we can do to either reclaim democracy or establish democracy where it never existed before. That is how we need to respond to the massacre that happened in New Zealand and the other massacres that are going on every day. Yes, 50 people were killed in New Zealand, but thousands of people are being killed around the world on an ongoing basis. This needs to end at some point. So I invite you to watch the next video. Please like and subscribe, share this with your friends, because I don't get anything back for doing these things. I would like to think that these videos would go around the world, including to places like New Zealand. Only you can make that happen. So my name is Scott McGurn. Please come back and join us for the next video, and thank you for your time.